Hey, so Matthew, the average gun owner here. Just a quick note on anybody who obtains certification and training from an independent NRA instructor or any other organization's instructor in New Jersey. Your permit is probably going to be invalid October 1st. Now, I know there's a lot of confusion on the interim requirements, but basically, there were a lot of people that certified, and I certified a lot of people as a NRA instructor who's not tied to a particular commercial range, and we're able to go out to different public ranges, shoot what were modified qualification courses, and as a result of the new interim standards, that's no longer allowed. You now have to draw from a holster, shoot while kneeling, and other specific requirements in that PTC qualification that the commercial ranges do not allow unless you've taken some of their own courses in terms of holster draw and other things. The other issue there is, most ranges don't allow independent NRA instructors to come in and teach courses on their premises unless you have them as an additional insured. I looked into that a few years ago. The ranges who would talk to me about doing that basically in the end said, well, we have to vet you even if you satisfy us with insurance. It's just not something we'll let anybody do. I get it. I know that CNJFO and other organizations run events, and us as independent instructors are allowed to go in there and run people through ports as a result of these other events, but there is some financial upside to the ranges for doing that, so they let that happen. But basically, if you're working with an independent instructor, I don't see how they can qualify you unless they have some private property or a private range that they can take you to get the qualification done. So it's unfortunate. I know that the ANJRPC has already addressed this issue with the court. It doesn't look like there's going to be any temporary restraints in place before the October 1st deadline. So basically, if your permit expires, let me get this right, if it expires before December 2023, you're okay. But in order for that to happen, your permit would have had to have been issued prior to the Bruin ruling, so that probably doesn't apply to anybody that I'm talking to here. Or if your permit was issued after July 1st, 2023, which, for those people, there's a very limited carve out because the state police didn't have the interim training materials, published as of July 1st like they were supposed to. So it's unfortunate. You're going to have to go through a commercial range. Most of them won't let you. I spoke to a couple and said, hey, look, if I run them through the use of force training and do the use and familiarization of a firearm, I can give them a training cert. Can they just go to you, run the qualification course, and you sign that portion of the certificate? There's an issue with two different training certs from two different instructors going to a police department who may not know how to deal with that. But the second issue is I spoke to a couple and I just stopped calling around because they seem to have no interest in doing that. So once again, the state has been quite successful in placing additional barriers in front of people, especially those of limited financial means in terms of getting their permit, and that's unfortunate. Also a little annoyed at some of the ranges right now for doing the same thing. I get it, they're in business to make money and they have insurance issues that are involved, but they could lighten the burden at least up front and accept training certificates for the written and classroom portions from outside instructors, because the state is willing to accept them, but it doesn't look like that is happening, unfortunately. So if basically everybody, unless your permit expires before December 22nd of this year, your permit's gonna be invalid as of October 1st. So be that as it may, do what you need to do. But if you do get pulled over or someone questions your permit and you don't have that, or if you are involved in the defensive gun use and it goes to court, the prosecutor is going to eat it up because you didn't do the police, what people are calling the John Wick style of qualification, because you didn't do that qualification, and your use of force or your use of that firearm was probably done in an incompetent manner and would have had a better outcome had you had this additional training, which, I mean, I'm not even going to get into the ludicrous nature of having to do a full police qualification, shooting weak hand, shooting kneeling at 25 yards. I can tell you right now, if you're shooting kneeling behind a barricade at 25 yards, don't hire me to defend you in criminal court, because that's going to be hard to defend a civilian shooting out at that distance. I mean, it's just insane what these requirements are. But a jury's going to hear a prosecutor who's going to argue you didn't undergo that training and therefore you were incompetent to handle that firearm. I know many of you have seen cases and videos where police have had a negligent discharge where they pulled a firearm, they displayed a firearm, held somebody, use of constructive authority to hold somebody at gunpoint, and as a result of some external stimulus and muscle reaction, they ended up pulling that trigger. Prosecutors have gone out there and argued this person didn't intend to pull the trigger. Lethal force was not justified. It was an accidental, negligent, or reckless shooting of the victim when you were the victim, ironically, that the other person was the victim and you didn't intend to shoot him. It was negligent because you didn't go through this enhanced training. And that is the argument they're going to make. And I'll tell you, probably more than half the juries out there will be receptive to that because they just won't know better. They'll have no training or understanding in firearms for the most part, especially in certain areas of New Jersey. That's definitely the case. So again, Matthew, the average gun owner, apologize to any students I ran through the courses. I can't recertify you unless I can find some private property to go out to where I can do the full qualification that's required under the new permit requirements. And the second thing, I don't know if I noted on this before, is obviously the law has always said if you have a permit you can carry any firearm you own, but the judges were requiring us to qualify with each pistol we want to carry. They were listing them either on the permit or they were listing them in a court order that you're supposed to carry with you. Well, the law was clear and has always been clear that if you have a permit you can carry any firearm you have, but the state has always been enforcing, even in the past for the civilians who do have the permits, enforcing this, the gun has to be listed, which was clearly in contradiction with a clear, plain reading of the statute. One of the counties came out and said, oh, look, they changed the law. You can now carry any firearm, which wasn't true. No change in law. It's always been that way. So the state police has posted a form. It's the PTC additional handguns intended to be carried form. Without getting into the long drawn-out argument over preemption laws, federal law, and the fact that there is no gun registration, I know, I get it. A lot of you will go to your departments and they'll still have records of the pistols that you purchased 10 years ago when they're not supposed to retain those records. I get it. There is actual registration of firearms in New Jersey, clearly in violation of longstanding law, but do note that if you fill out this form and list all the other handguns you own and you hand it in to the police department, there's a very good argument that falls outside of the prohibition against gun registrations. And that's because you've voluntarily provided that information outside of the permit process to purchase a firearm. So, just be guided accordingly. If you have an old 1911 heirloom that you might want to carry once to a friend's barbecue, well, I'm telling you, don't carry it, don't list it, you're voluntarily registering it. So, that's just the fact there. It's something not a lot of people are talking about, the registration aspect of this, but if you do list the guns on there and you voluntarily turn it in, it's no different than the New Jersey existing law where when you move here from another state, you do have to get a firearm owner ID card, but it's a voluntary form of register if you want to register all those handguns that you had legally possessed outside of the state before you came here. So it's basically going to fall within an exception. And by filling out this form and listing all 15 handguns that you own, you've just voluntarily registered all of those with the police department. So if there's ever a case in the future where they say, oh, the police are holding on to these forms longer than they should, so they have to purge them out of their rolls, that might not apply to this form that people are handing in. So just a note on that too. Again, this has been a minefield of compliance with respect to a guaranteed natural-born civil right, but unfortunately that's a situation you're in if you live in states like, New Jersey, New York, parts of California and Hawaii, who is going through some litigation and having, some success out there. But it's still going to be a long, drawn-out process that's going to take many years. And just know that after October 1st, don't rely on, I know a lot of people out there are saying, oh, just do it, go to the courts, you'll win in the courts. Okay, if you have six figures to fight this and maybe or maybe not get picked up by the Supreme Court, then, have fun with that. But that's not the route that I would take. So, Matthew, the average gun owner, hope you enjoy your weekend, but, despite this frustrating news.